Take me back to 2020. You're in finance and you decide to open a business.
So I was working to address some of certain health issues at the time, specifically some gut issues. A lot of the foods that I was consuming, protein bars being one of them, I could no longer have. I created something that was edible for me, edible for friends and family, and then I took to Google, how do you start a business? How do you create an LLC? You only need a handful of yeses. You're never going to get a yes unless you ask. If inaction is no, then there's only upside in trying. I knew from that point that I still needed to have something of my own.
Yeah.
And it didn't need to be massive. It just needed to be something that piece of contribution to this world.
Welcome to a new episode on the podcast, where today we explore the stories of remarkable entrepreneurs and innovators. I'm excited to welcome our special guest today, Jen Newman, the brilliant mind behind Just Nosh, a delicious and nutritious collagen protein bar. Jen is also the co-founder of JAG Provisions. Her journey from self-funding her business to navigating the complexities of the consumer packaged goods industry is truly inspiring. We'll be exploring her entrepreneurial path, from her early struggles to the triumphs in creating a line of retail-ready products. Jen will share her experiences with self-funding and the crucial decisions that have shaped her company's growth. She'll also open up about her personal journey, including how her passion for nutrition and health sparked her own experiences, which led her to this path. Jen's background in finance and business challenge management has been instrumental in her success, but it was her desire to make a real impact that drove her to start her own venture. Today, we'll learn about the challenges she faced in transitioning from a corporate life to the entrepreneurship, and how she's been methodical about her company's growth while navigating the temptations and pressure of scaling up. Get ready to be inspired by Jen Newman's story of determination, passion, and resilience. Let's dive into our conversation and uncover the journey behind Just Nosh and the vision Jen has for the future.
Thank you. That's quite an intro.
Welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
Beautiful space. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So take me back to 2020. The world shut down. You're in finance and you decide to open a business.
Yeah. So COVID, the gift of COVID, I call it kind of the power of the pause. So I was working a corporate job. And I live in the Bay Area, I lived in the Bay Area, and I was commuting to San Francisco, which took up a lot of time. I'd get up in the morning, like at 4:45, go work out, commute, work, come back home, and do that pretty much day in and day out. And so the gift of COVID, in a way, allowed me to pause and to reevaluate what was important to me, how I was spending my time, and, what really mattered. So kind of how this all began was I was no longer commuting, and I was taking stock of my health and was taking stock of, what do I care about? And I kind of looked inward and started paying more attention to my health. And it's a very long story short, but basically
we have time.
Yeah, that's true.
We have time.
We do have time. So I was working to address some of certain health issues at the time, specifically some gut issues. And I was working with a practitioner and kind of had to overhaul my whole diet. And so as a result, a lot of the foods that I was consuming, protein bars being one of them, I could no longer have, which was such a bummer and a buzzkill, because protein bars were my favorite snack and still are to this day. So in order to keep eating them, I had to figure out a way to make them on my own. Because even though there's so many bars out there, they just didn't kind of live up to my standards, if that makes sense.
In terms of quality or how they were being made?
Yeah, quality, and then certain ingredients that are just kind of harder to digest, like certain proteins or kind of more intense fibers. You'll kind of hear a lot of people say, which was, also in a way what helped prove out the reason to be for this. Talking to people, they'll say like, oh, this tastes great, but it sits in my stomach. Or, this tastes amazing, but I feel like crap after. Yeah. And so like as someone who experienced those things as well, like, that kind of helped along the way to prove that this, is a problem that I'm not only solving for myself, but other people. So anyway, I kind of like figured out a way to mash a few things together that, I took bits and pieces of the things that I ate that I knew were of high quality and that I could consume and digest well. And that was sort of the beginning of it. And so I made this, protein bar for myself. And then as time progressed, I kind of further thought to myself, if this is a problem that I have, that maybe, others have it too. And so that's really what started the whole, let's make a protein bar for me. Like, how about let's make a protein bar for you? So
when you say you made the bar,
your
first time around, did you actually make the bar, like physically make it yourself?
For years, years.
Wow, okay.
So this was the bars that are on shelf today are not remotely close to what they were when I was making them in my house, because I don't have a background in food science. I don't know how to bake. I can barely cook. So what I made for myself back then, it took many iterations, a lot of help along the way, just even getting them from stage 1 to stage 2 to where they are today. So
you started cooking them in a house. Were you then selling them yourself, or is it just, how did that sale process happen?
Yeah, so that was Googling how to start a business. So basically, I created something that was edible for me, edible for friends and family. And then I took to Google, how do you start a business? How do you create an LLC? How do you get, especially for food, you have to be, obviously, there are a lot of regulations around food safety. So effectively, I created a farmer's market business out of my kitchen without really doing the farmer's market piece. So I created a website, I'd sell online. I distributed in a few local grocery stores. But kind of going back to the whole kind of corporate versus this business thing, I think, working in that corporate setting, I just found myself not very fulfilled. So specifically with finance, it's a great skill to have. It served me incredibly well even today, just knowing, how to cost and evaluate certain decisions. But I felt like I was kind of like a weather reporter in a way, reporting on numbers, things that were happening, but not really making decisions, not having impact.
In your 9 to 5?
Correct. Yeah. And so for me, impact is everything. It's like we spend the majority of our lives working.
Yes.
And so for me, like, again, thinking about what it is that I'm curious about, what it is that I want to create impact around was kind of the push to even start Googling. So
up until that point, had you ever owned a business, or was
no? So
you just strictly decided to jump all in?
Strictly started, yeah. And I think, and I had, I'm a podcast consumer. So being, a podcast consumer, curious about CPG, I had been on the sidelines for quite some time, sort of learning about how this all works.
Yep.
Obviously, the stories that you hear about are with founders who are, far ahead of where I was and still am. But having, kind of hearing those stories over and over again, at least provided a little bit of runway and guidance to kind of create some form of vision. And then, from there, just getting very tactical about actually how do you create an LLC and open a business bank account? Because I think for a lot of people, there's a big difference between having an idea and then actually brass tacks, how do you execute?
Yeah.
The 1,000 steps that seemingly are insignificant, but allow you to do your thing. So.
Were you self-funded?
So I would consider the business in stages. So when I was operating out of my kitchen and then a commercial kitchen, like very small, localized.
Yes.
Yeah, I use my own money.
Yeah.
And
Stage one.
What?
Stage one.
Yeah, stage one. Stage one. Yeah, and like very willingly.
Yeah.
And every stage requires an investment. Obviously then it wasn't much, but still it's because to a degree, it's your own money. You have to care. You always have to care. So yeah, back then, self-funded. And then I think, again, moving along through the different phases, you kind of have to ask yourself, am I still solving a problem for other people? Because that's the point of a business. It's what's your impact? What is your contribution? If you're not solving a problem, then you're not going to have a business. So I think as we progressed, different phases, Just Nosh becoming commercialized, creating JAG Provisions, which I can get into. It's like an umbrella company. But at that point, we decided to raise just a little bit of friends and family money compared to kind of the average CPG funding. It's very minimal. So I would say we're mostly self-funded. At this point, being a couple years into it, we're basically running on our own. And that's a lot to do with my business partner, Gary, who kind of works a couple of things to make that happen for us. So technically, I would say we're mostly self-funded at this point, which is great, but also has its challenges for growth and psychologically and
feel that.
Yeah.
What was the hardest point of trying to get it off the ground?
I think the patience, really, because there's a massive gap between something that you make with your own hands and then, something you can, pick off a shelf in a store. And that took in itself about a year.
Wow, okay.
So again, Just Nosh, JAG Provisions, it's kind of confusing, but at the point in which we decided to take our product from, me making it in a warehouse to professionally manufacturing it with this great group of guys in Denver, that span was 26 iterations of working with a food scientist and about 9 months of work. Yeah. Yeah. Because if you think about it, something that I'm making with my hands, think about it as like a baked good almost, right? Like I can give it to you and it'll be great for a few weeks. And then you're like, all right, I'm over this. Versus something that can hang out on a shelf for months.
Yeah, it's just going to say the shelf life that's needed for the product in order to actually sell. Right.
And so so going back to your question, I think it's the patience, because things like that don't happen overnight. And so what are you doing in the interim to create some sort of agency and, control, and you feel like you're moving the needle and that this is actually going to work. And those feelings I felt at that time, I feel today, are kind of constant. And so I think, there's so many amazing things in this whole business. The act of pursuing something that I care so much about is a gift. And so I think it's kind of always coming back to like, why am I doing this, as a way to anchor me during those periods of time where I feel like nothing is happening.
You feel like you're just spinning in circles.
And you're, to a degree, it's like when you have your own business, the thought is that, you have so much autonomy and so much control over your destiny. When in reality, and it's not so much that it's a bad thing, because it means that you're working with so many other people, but you are sort of left to the hands of so many other stakeholders to help move things along.
Yeah.
So,
do you ever think you'll get to that part where you are looking for bigger investors to come in?
Yeah, I think so. That's a goal. And I think something that Gary and I discuss all the time is what does that timing look like? Because when you start to raise, you have the opportunity to scale and you have the opportunity to grow, and a lot of doors can be opened for you.
Yeah.
The irony, though, at the same time, is you actually lose control. So you obviously lose, a percentage of your company in doing so. And then
in terms of equity,
yeah. Right. And then even decision making. So depending on the type of money that you raise, you're kind of, to a degree, at the mercy of the people that you raise from, because they're going to have growth expectations.
Of course.
They'll have, if they don't understand the ins and outs of it, they may have, a distorted viewpoint of what needs to happen. Yep. And so then you end up in a trap of, do you start compromising? Do you make decisions that you wouldn't have otherwise would have made? Yep. But the goal is to kind of exhaust our growth on our own and then retain help along the way in a more economical form, if possible. And then at the point in which we feel that we've proven ourselves in the market, I think then it would make more sense. Yeah.
Looking back on your life, did you ever think that you would become an entrepreneur?
Oh, that's a good question. I knew that I always wanted to lead in some capacity. And, if I think back to my childhood, I wasn't ever the one that, was the one to like raise my hand and, go to the front and kind of be the quote leader of the group. But I always kind of ended up being the group project mom, or, the one to kind of do everything.
The problem solver?
The problem solver, correct. Yeah, exactly. And so I think I knew it's something that I wanted, and I just didn't understand what that vision would be like. I think perhaps I thought I would figure out a way to lead someone else's company. So, contribute to someone else's dream and then kind of hope that I cared about it enough to make it my own.
Yep.
And I think as I worked in several different corporate jobs, each having their own pros and cons, I got very close to that feeling of I'm doing something I care about. It's not my own, but I really give a crap about it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I did feel like at the end of the day, I didn't have the agency that I wanted. It wasn't sort of like a fully tapped potential as far as wanting to create the impact that I desired. So I knew within the last 3-ish years that in order to feel as fulfilled as possible, that it needed to be something on my own.
Is that essentially what came to light for you by taking the pause in COVID?
Yes, 1,000%. Yeah. And so even like if even if I were to continue or had continued working for another company, I knew from that point that I still needed to have something of my own.
Yeah.
And it didn't need to be massive. It just needed to be something that I felt like, was my little piece of contribution to this world.
I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Do you have hopes to scale Just Nosh into like much bigger, or what are your hopes for it?
1,000%. Yeah. And I kind of go back to the why that I started this. And at the time of wanting to reevaluate my health and some prior eating disorder issues I had had in college, what I lacked was the education and the knowledge to make better decisions for myself. And so part of wanting to scale the company is several things. One, it's I love business. I love ops. It's validating to see something that you created from nothing grow into something.
Yep.
Yeah. So one piece of it, which I'll fully admit. And then the second piece, I come back to my why. It's like providing the intersection of health and convenience, like something that's nourishing, something that, is a positive spark of joy for someone's everyday.
Yeah.
And so to get that into more people's hands, is something to go after, of course. And then, the third piece is providing education for people, which again is something that I spend, my whole life doing now because I love it. But a lot of people lack the knowledge of how to fuel their bodies and about, wellness as a whole. And, not to their fault. There's, so many companies and
so much information.
Yeah. And there are, governments involved in subsidies, all these things that, we don't need to go into. Yeah. But
it's another story for another day.
Yeah, exactly. For many days. But yeah, and just so again, that kind of like contribution to the world is just providing, the thing for people to consume that they can enjoy on the go, but then also, the knowledge base of, this is what we've made and here is why. And then beyond that, to create a platform that, can provide more information for people as well.
How did you become so passionate about the health and wellness space or the fitness space, if you will?
Yeah, so I think the origins of that, I was a kid, I was always very active.
Yeah.
Played sports all my life. And then during college, I decided that I didn't want to be an athlete. I kind of wanted to have the classic experience of, go to class, have fun with friends, do the obligatory internship your parents tell you to do. But
I thought we were going a completely different way with this story. I thought it was the party story.
That's the way I thought we were going. No, I've been there, done that. I'm like a grandma inside.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in college, I didn't pursue athletics, and so it was kind of this whole retraining of like what is a movement practice, what is a daily routine look like.
Okay.
And so my freshman year, that's kind of when I partied for the first time. Didn't last very long, but it was a moment in time.
Freshman year being like what, year 9, year 10? Year 9, year 10 for freshmen?
What do you mean by that? What, in what way? Sorry?
Like freshman year, what year is that?
Oh, God. That was 20. I'm young. 20.
Well, no, like year as in like what? Is that a high school grade or were you in college?
Oh, that's college.
Okay, great.
College, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Freshman year of college. So yeah, kind of figuring out like a whole new life for myself that wasn't as structured. And so like many others, gained the freshman 15. And so college kind of became a place where I felt a bit out of control. And so to gain control, that was, sort of how an eating disorder developed. Obviously not by choice. And so that was, a journey in itself. And so the road to recovery in that was educating myself on food being fuel and food being nutrition and not something to reject or to fight, or as a means to, to control over. And so, but prior to that, and, I'm still very much a student, I didn't know anything about anything. So there was no knowledge base around ingredient health. How do I fuel my body?
Yeah.
I didn't have to think about it before. So it was really kind of coming out of that and shifting my perspective around food and nutrition to something now that I see as, something to every day learn about and to appreciate. So that was, the origins, really.
So there's always a story behind something, right?
Yeah,
always.
Yeah.
What was the hardest challenge of moving through that into like a much healthier version
during that recovery process? A factor of time. And yeah, I think having help made a big difference, guidance in that process. And then, yeah, I mean, it's just all of that's a long shift of your whole operating system.
Yeah.
You know, down to like how you do life, you know, the 1,000 decisions you make in a day. So a very long process in itself. But I think the most significant piece in how I kind of came out of that was reframing what food was. Yeah. And so being able to think about it as something that is helpful, that can help me more love myself. And then treating that as a way, again, to come back to like the education piece of what can I learn from this, was, yeah, I guess how I got out of it.
I can agree. It's not a easy path. It's most definitely a hard process to go through. And I feel like it's still one that can play on your mind constantly.
Yeah. Well, especially in this space. I mean, as I think you would know too, like you're very knee deep in health and wellness. And I know, you know, for you, like you've found a balance as well.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah. Balance for me in the health and wellness space is very, it's very much a seesaw for me. Like I find it very hard to find balance in that area.
Yeah.
Similarly struggled with the idea of eating because it's a good thing for you. It was very a controlled method, which kind of just then manifested into extremes, which was competing.
Yes.
So the toggle between the two is very difficult. I'm either calculated, everything's portioned, and we're good to go.
Right.
Or I'm just not eating.
Right.
So it's like there's no middle ground.
Yes.
I tried the middle ground for a little bit, and it just played with my head too much because all I was focusing on was making sure I ate. And then I'm thinking about all this food that I'm eating and what is it actually doing to my body? And if the scale's increasing, then that's not a good thing.
Right.
So I kind of felt more trapped than if I just ate when I wanted to.
Yeah. But even, I mean, the concept of that, eating when I want to, I think is actually, it's such a struggle for a lot of people too, because it's sort of ask yourself, you know, how can two things be true at the same time? So how can I, you know, for vanity purposes or certain strength goals or whatever in the gym or fitness, whatever, how can you kind of tailor that to that, you know, more balanced mentality of, you know, I'm going to eat when I think I need it. And yeah, that is something to solve for.
I know. If you solve it, let me know.
Yeah.
But it is, you are right. It's a hard toggle between the two. I can't have strength goals and not eat.
Right.
I also can't perform at a level that I want to perform and not eat.
Yes.
I think the reason I was so appealing to competing was the fact that I could not eat, still train, and then get on stage and look
and
like
get rewarded for that.
Yeah, and it's like, you look so great.
Right.
Like, I'm starving, but thank you. Like, thank you.
Like 1,000%.
I haven't eaten today, but thank you.
Yeah.
So it's like this vicious cycle.
Yes.
Of rewarding, and it's just like confirming what you need to know about yourself to make it better.
Yes. Yeah. And I even think that there are those cycles that occur that aren't even as, you know, like 3 standard deviations away from the mean. Like those cycles can occur in other like thought patterns that, you know, you don't have to be starving to have that kind of go through your mind. So I think
that's a society thing, right?
Totally.
Where we're told we need to be thin because thin is more rewarding, or thin is better, or thin whatever. Especially if you grew up in the 90s, I feel like. Like we got hit that hard.
Yeah.
So thinking it outside of that context, as soon as somebody loses weight, the first response to it is, you look so good.
Yes.
Have you lost weight?
Right.
And you're like, thank you for rewarding my terrible behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also it being, the least interesting thing about you.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah. About anybody.
Yes,
like, it's like,
about anyone.
Like literally bottom of the barrel scooping for people.
Yeah.
Tell me about JAG Provisions, being a parent company of Just Nosh.
Yes. I thought so. Yeah. Connecting the two. So, I mentioned Gary. So Gary Embleton is my amazing business partner. We are basically best friends. We're kind of the same person. He's just 50 and a man, and I'm much younger and a woman. But we worked together at several companies prior to starting our own, and so that's how we got to know each other. And so the company we were at prior to starting JAG Provisions sold, and again, another gift. These things are many things that have happened that have led up to this point have been, you could say luck, you can say gifts. And so you still have to make the decision to proceed, to go left or right. But I do recognize that I and we are in a very fortunate and lucky position to even take a whack at it. Which is something that sometimes keeps me up at night, but beside the point. So we basically, fork in the road. Do we go, get corporate jobs and work for other people? He has a lot of supply chain background. He could go run anything he wanted. And then, so we kind of came together and said, why don't we take this opportunity to start our own thing? Because we both, live in the world of health and fitness and wellness. We both, have shared the same problems of finding real quality food out there. And so our niche, when we came together is, again, that sort of intersection of health meets convenience is for us fairly not untapped, but just not enough optionality for people like us who are reading every little ingredient on the back of that label. So anyway, we TLDR came together, said, let's create a company. And so kind of the structure of that is JAG Provisions is the parent company. And then Just Nosh is one of the brands under that.
Okay.
And then simultaneously, he acquired his friend's oatmeal company.
Okay, cool.
So, a lot of things going on. And then the third, which is in development, we worked at a grass-fed regenerative meat company. And so we developed, pretty... great background in meats and whatnot, and
all the meats,
all the meats connected well to that world.
Yep.
And so, for now, at least we have, a formula and designs on a 0 sugar grass-fed jerky. So we've got,
that's really cool.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet. It's costly to make, but that's sort of in the future. So we have these 3 kind of product SKUs lines going on. And so the idea over time is for Just Nosh, which is now, retail ready indoors, to expand. And then we'll take these oatmeal SKUs, kind of do a rationalization, get the packaging better, get them retail ready, scale that. And then at some point do the jerky, and then kind of use the 1 + 1 = 3 idea of synergy to kind of, have everything, circulating in the market.
Once. Is the goal to then eventually one day sell, or is it just to keep growing them as much as you can? What's the goal there?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start this with the intention to sell. So I think, most people, the goal is someday to exit. And so that's definitely, a goal for sure. But I want this to be part of my life for, at least the next 10 years or however long I feel it takes to tap out on all its potential. And so for me, that comes back to expanding it, making it national, providing that education for people, expanding our product lines. So I think that will take a long time. But I also want it to take a long time because this is the most fulfilling experience, ever. And so I think beyond this, what I see myself doing if an exit happens, in a decade or later is helping other founders do the same. So I plan on always living in this sphere. Because there is no better feeling than connecting with people whose problem you're also solving.
Yeah. There's something about being service to somebody else who is trying to do the same thing that you did.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that relatability component is everything. So
do you like the journey or the destination? Just hearing you talk, I'm very curious to your answer.
Yeah. It's funny how people will talk about the idea of, once you reach that goal, that milestone, that it's a bit anticlimactic, or at least the feeling of accomplishment is very fleeting. And admittedly, I like solving problems and I like having the next thing to tackle. And I'm also admittedly very bad at celebrating wins.
Same.
Yeah.
It's like next one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, even this, have you celebrated this whole production you got? So yeah, I am a journey girl.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that getting to the destination, each milestone it validates the why and validates the existence of this. And I think the destination is like, okay, great. This is getting this product or our idea into more hands. But I love the journey piece because that's where, you make the connections with people. That's where you learn. Getting 1,000 rejections in a row, there's so many learnings in that.
Yeah.
As cliche, it's so cliche, but it's so true. And I think if you reach the destination within 10 minutes, that's a boring story.
I'm such a destination person.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way?
Like, okay, I think I don't ever enjoy the journey. Not that it's not enjoyable. It's just I'm so focused on doing it that it's just a tunnel vision and nothing else matters. And I'm a very all or nothing person.
But do you see, so let's just say like your destination is step Z.
Yeah.
Do you see points A, B, C, D through Z as like mini destinations?
No. Like if let's say I wanted to make $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Nothing else matters.
So not the 250, so then what is your,
and that's like, it's a problem. I'll add this in. That's a problem. Because unless I'm making the million, I'm failing.
Right.
Like every milestone before that is, it's not $1 million. So you're failing.
Fair.
Keep going.
Okay. So it's always the million is what keeps you knocking down the door every day. Does that million ever change for you though, knowing that
So as soon as I hit that, it's like let's say it's $1 million, right? Pretend here. If it's $1 million and I hit it tomorrow, I'm like, we're done. Ticked. Now it's 10 million or 5 million, 2 million, whatever. But I hit the goal and I've moved it already. In my head, that it's like literally it's just a flick. So there's no celebrating. It's you hit it. Okay, now you're the next goal. Like, what are you doing? And it just becomes the next thing and the next thing.
And have you ever reshifted the focus of that million? Like if you're going down the path of that million, do you ever stop and say, oh, maybe this isn't the right million?
No. only because only because in my head it's like you started this, you finish it. I'll use competing for example. Like when I started competing, it was just because I wanted to try something different, and then I started it, and I was like, oh, I watched a pro show and I was like, oh, I could do that. And as soon as I said that, I was like, well, no, you have to do it. And even though numerous times along the thing, I was like, this is not for me.
Yeah. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah,
You're
like,
in it and you know this isn't serving you.
I have to finish the job.
Yeah.
So I became a pro, and the day that I came a pro, I was like, we're done here. Did it. Said I was going to do it, but we're done. Yeah, that's kind of how I look at most things.
Has that, since you've moved through, I mean, you do accomplish the things that you set out for. So as you've been through that cycle over and over again, have you reevaluated your process for deciding what that million is?
Yes. Like so since selling the gym, I've taken the time to be like, let's stop and think about this. Yeah. Because the next thing that you say, oh, I want to do, you have to do it. So it's like, be certain that the next thing that you're doing is what you want. Yeah. Because it might not be a year thing. It might be 5 years, and maybe it's 10 years. So if you're looking at that next thing, is that the thing that you truly want? Yes. Or you're just saying, I could do that.
Yeah. 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 Well, and I think that's growth. Yeah. And to your point too about, you know, if this goal is going to take 5 or 10 years, which I totally relate to, I think it comes back to, and maybe we're kind of saying the same thing, but you know, it's in order to get to that, you know, 10-year goal, there are, you know, many goals that have to be achieved between now and then to reach that end goal. And so I think it's like, I think the only difference, and again, we probably have the same approach, but it's getting pretty knee deep of all of those little specific goals and things that need to accomplish and you need to do in order to hit that longer term goal. Yeah. And that's, you know, journey.
I like to get there as fast as possible then. like how can I halve this time frame and do it as quickly as possible? Even if it, like, obviously it's different from creating a product, right?
Yeah. But okay, but for this next phase, what does that look like for you? What's the $1 million?
Like, what's the thing?
Yeah.
Current thing, and I say current because there'll probably be another one that pops up, is to become a speaker. Okay. Right, in keynotes. So how can I make that happen as fast as possible? And where do I need to go? Who do I need to see? Who do I need to be around? Who do I need to become to be that? And if the person that I need to become, I can fix those things tomorrow, then let's fix them.
So like TED Talk and then monk and then you're like full
let's
caveman after. Amazing.
I don't know, like I think once you know how you can just feel like once you start something, you're like, oh, this is what I was meant to do. Yeah. That's how I feel about speaking.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think too, because it's such a I mean, you're making it a specific goal, but it's also general. And so I think the pro in that is that it will open up so many doors for you too, to, you know, maybe you'll find some goals in there as well.
Something else to find.
Yeah.
What was your biggest challenges that you've faced so far in Just Nosh?
I mean, I think it goes back to the idea of patience. And I think similarly to you, it's how do we get this account, get this new flavor, check off all these boxes as soon as possible. While at the same time knowing that this is a task, or these are tasks that require so many other people and things that are out of my control to a degree. And some things that might require more resources than we're currently allocating. So I think it's, I think it's an exercise of patience. And so I think coming back to, and again, another kind of cliche thing, but true, like coming back to my why constantly is very important. And sometimes that comes from a very empowered place. Like if I've done, for example, like a store demo at Erewhon, which is a bougie chain in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
If, you know, I come out of that and I've met some amazing people who, you know, like going back to our previous conversation, you know, sharing the same problem. So I'm helping them solve the problem. And if, you know, connecting with people or getting a win or something like that, it feels very empowering.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, there are some days where I'm showing up because I don't want this to go away. And I fear, you know, what is life like if this business doesn't exist? What is life like if I have to go get another corporate job? And so admittedly, you know, I'm not going to always show up with the best kind of mindset, but I'm always going to show up because I care so deeply about this. So I think, you know, the patience and kind of grace it requires has been the most challenging. And, but yeah, I mean, I know every day I'm going to come back because it's like, there's nothing more, or else that I want to do.
In the early stages of the business, what popped up in terms of like obstacles that you had to overcome, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the themes of the obstacles in the early days aren't too dissimilar to the ones that we face now. They just kind of appear differently. So I think in the early days it was product development based. You know, it was who will take a shot at us to even make this product? Who will who will invest their own time and resources to give us a chance? And those are the same types of obstacles that we experience today, whether it's you know, buyers or, you know, I do a lot of cold outreach because we don't have, you know, a sales team. I'm the saleswoman. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of outreach, and it's people who take a chance and say, sure, let me try your product. Let me hear your story. And so I think, again, it kind of goes back to, you know, what kind of agency do you have? What kind of control do you have? And kind of dealing with that mindset often is an obstacle that, you know, was shared then and is shared now.
How do you handle the no's that you get?
I mean, I welcome them. I get a lot of
not
them.
Well.
No, I mean, it's just part of the game.
Yeah.
Because I think the idea is, you only need a handful of yeses, and they're important, but you only need a handful. And so it's kind of the idea of oblivion, where you never know where they're going to come out of. And you're never going to get a yes unless you ask.
Yeah,
and so the no is really you reach out or you ask and someone says no, or you don't do anything. And so
it's still a no. Yeah.
Right. And so the inaction, meaning, you know, if inaction is no, then there's only upside in trying. So that's
I like that thought process.
Yeah.
You can't, when you look at it that way, you're not, either way, you're not like quote unquote losing, right?
Right.
The only potential is the no, which is a redirection, or the yes, and you get what you want.
Exactly. Yeah. Have
you ever thought about stopping at the no's?
Meaning just quitting?
Like if you get too many.
No. I mean, I kind of, I mean, some no's hit harder than others, because some no's well, it's either a yes, a no, or not right now.
Okay.
With if you're working on accounts. And so, for example, there was one that we've identified as being pretty game changing. And it's like top of my dream list. And so we got pretty much like to the very end, and we were in like the yes camp. And this group got acquired. And so they basically like paused all of their ops. And so it went from a very likely yes to just like nothing. Literally nothing. Shit. And so I think what's even worse than a no is like just no response. Yeah. Just tell me.
Just ghosted.
Just tell me. I don't want to be ghosted. So, I went in the not right now camp, and then again with patience and time, I don't know if it will be a yes, but months and months later, they're now starting to, resume and move forward a little bit. So for the time being, that kind of purgatory of not right now / no is just like awful. So I think, the longer that you invest in something, or the more that you kind of deem its value of how game changing it could be, those no's are harder because you're more, either the time you invested or the emotion you've invested is a lot more significant versus, I can send out, 10 emails in an hour to, they're not random. They're places that I think would be, product market fit. And if I don't hear, if I get a no, then it's, move on to the next. So I think, to answer your question, there have been no's throughout the business that have hurt harder than others. But I think it's some of the wins and yeses that have proved, what we're doing matters and that we have a reason to be. I think those yeses, and then just the idea that I care way too much to stop, are things that, make quitting not an option.
I like that. Quitting's never an option.
Yeah.
Although pivoting is... Pivoting's okay.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too, like there is something to say for quitting can be an amazing decision.
What's the saying? When is know when to quit.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that. I absolutely love that. And like quit while you're ahead, or...
Meanwhile, my brain's like, you said you would do it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think at least, bird's eye view for the decisions that you've made, you've so well pivoted, like you've been very methodical about the pivot. And I think you've been rewarded in your patience in that too.
Which a very common theme right now is, as I'm talking to people, is patience. Like no one has any.
Yeah.
Like not one entrepreneur who's sat here, they've all said patience. Like, I don't have patience, need to work on my patience. None of us have it.
I think in today's day and age, it's there's so much pressure with the accessibility we have to social media. This was a shower thought I had the other day, actually. Like if we didn't have any form of the phones connecting to, like really understanding what everyone else is doing. If we 50 years ago, you knew what your neighbors were doing. If you had a brick and mortar, you can walk down the street and see that, Susie's busy, Joe's not, whatever. But that was your only kind of, point of comparison. And so there's, a saying, comparison is the thief of joy, which I largely agree with. I think that it can be motivating in ways.
Yeah, I see it as motivating.
Yeah, I think it is largely motivating. But I think how patience comes up is when you're constantly inundated with people's LinkedIn feeds or Instagram celebrations. And there's nothing wrong with those. We all do it, and we should, we should celebrate our wins in that way. I think it just, for everyone in their own little vortex, creates this pressure of, I'm not growing fast enough. I'm not doing enough.
It's my head.
Yeah. And it's my all the time, all the time. And I mean, it's like,
it's literally do more.
Yeah. Do more. Or like, you're not doing enough. You're not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, I think you're right. I think social media plays into that, and you're viewing somebody's, 10th year in business as opposed to your first.
Yes.
Or somebody else's network to your network that you don't have, or at least don't have access to on the same level. Like the access that we have to networks in Newport Beach or LA is very different to a network that somebody might have in Minnesota.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So location, everything. So in that aspect, very hard to try and not play the comparison game, or why are they there and I'm here type of thing.
Yeah. 1000%. Yeah. And then I think, and I think patience is, I think it's a theme for everyone, but I think when you're trying to create your own thing and move something along, as I'm sure you can relate to, you have an idea and you have a vision of what you want, what that $1 million is, right, down the line. Yeah. And so you're always thinking about, how can I speed this up?
I see the big picture. I have my hardest thing is I see the big picture. I know what I want and I know how it's meant to look. But the starting point's the hardest. Not because I don't know what I want or how it's meant to look. It's just I don't know how to break it down to like the little steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can look at somebody else and be like, okay, that's the big picture. Here's what we got to do. Let's go. But trying to break down the little tiny steps is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that for many, those are, they're barriers for people to proceed, because the vision is very attractive. And again, I think with social media too, it seems, I don't know if easy is the right word, but it seems incredibly tangible.
I think it's easier now than it was, say, 3 years ago or 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I think it's more glamorized. Yeah. Like not everyone should be an entrepreneur. Not everyone needs to be.
Totally.
But it's definitely become glamorized.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it is all about those 20,000 steps between now and your speaking engagement, your TED Talk.
Yeah, right. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm like, maybe I can make it happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
You never know.
What would you place your key growth points along the way? Because you're 4 years in business, right?
Yeah. So, 4 years technically in business. I would say though, if we're just talking about Just Nosh, for example, the bars and kind of their retail ready shelf life forms, on Amazon, wherever, that's been a little less than a year and a half, or I guess a year and a half at this point. Which is a pretty short amount of time. And then there's so much, it's like you get your product and you're like, okay, what do I do with this? And then
have this thing now.
I have this thing, and retail, getting into retail doors, they're very like long life cycles and whatnot. So I would say, there's kind of, this is the phase that we're in. And I would say for this particular phase, which is most relevant to us, I think it kind of comes back to, not spray and pray, but just going for it and welcoming the no's and, getting lucky on those few yeses, which were educated, calculated, methodical. So I think it's being fortunate to work with so many great stakeholders, from our, co-packers to our vendor suppliers, our retail partners, surrounding yourself with great people who can help move you along the way. And then I think too, it also comes back to just really understanding your market and your audience and your consumer, and figuring out, how do I get this thing that I know they need in front of them. And again, it requires, many things and people that are out of your control, but just knocking down those doors has opened up a few of them. And so the goal over time is to get, more bigger doors opened by that.
I like it. What are you projecting that for, like over the next few years?
That kind of timeline. Yeah. I mean, I even hope in the next 6 months, there are a few things that I hope kind of come to fruition, or certain things that we unlock. So we all get very specific. For example, like Amazon is a channel we all use. We all
love it.
We live on it.
Yeah. Prime Day,
the best days. And so, for us, that's something that we've been talking a lot about recently, in the context of how do we create agency and control, and how do we move the needle while other channels take more time. And so it's, let's invest in this where maybe more doors can open by putting our efforts into this channel. It can reach more people. Who knows, who those people are. Yeah. We have better control over inventory or supply just by doing that. So, again, kind of going back to your original question, there are goals I have in the next 6 months that I hope can start to, we'll see through. And then I think bigger picture, who knows where we'll be a year from now, 2 years from now. But I do look back every, 6 months and say, like, what have we done? Where can we improve? What needs to be, like, how do we move this forward even more? So I don't have a specific, like, X number of years, but I think, within these, like, the infancy, you just hope that every year you're just exponentially better. Yeah.
For those listening, if you could give them 3 takeaways, what would you give them?
For
if I'm wanting to venture out and start my own business?
I'd say number 1, you have to be, I think, well, you don't have to be anything. I think it's helpful to be obsessed.
Yeah, no, I agree too.
Yeah, and then I think the word passion is thrown around a lot. And passion is important, but I also think that being curious is arguably even more important.
In what ways?
Just, when you think about how do you start it, like, how did you create your own LLC or your corporation? There's so many little things that you need to do to have your own business name, like all these little steps. And so I think if you have to have the curiosity about, like, the short-term and long-term vision to actually execute on what needs to happen.
Yeah.
In the world of making a protein bar, I am very curious about the food science behind it. With all of my 1,000 requirements of what I want in it and what I don't want in it, how can we make that work? So I think curiosity is important because you're always going to be a student. So I don't know if that counts for 1 or 2, but definitely be obsessed.
We'll class it as 1.
Okay. Be obsessed and be curious.
Yeah.
I would say, given what we talked about regarding patience and kind of the world of media and comparison, I do think, and I'm terrible at this and always working on it, but just kind of giving yourself some grace and celebrating the wins, as they say. Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of relates to the first point, but, like, really have a connection to the why. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I waking up and sending emails to people I don't know, hoping that they'll understand why I'm doing this thing? And like I said before, you'll wake up each day with a different reason to pursue your thing, but having a really core foundational why, I think, is the most important piece to actualize what you want out of it.
I like this.
Yeah,
a lot.
But for you, yeah. So what's your what's your why for speaking?
Because I can give a much larger impact as opposed to anything else. Speaking is I can reach mass amounts of people, all at once, or let's say it is a TED talk, right? Or a TEDx talk, whatever it is, that video lives on forever. So then that moment in time is now impacting people beyond my time. It's like a podcast. A podcast is a moment in time, but in this moment will live on for X amount of years or however long the internet's up, right? Right. So it's here to stay. So I've always looked at the impact that I can have, and whether it's big enough. And sometimes I'm told like people say you should set SMART goals, like small, measurable, whatever else. I don't do that because to me, like, puts me in a box or it confines me. I want to set a goal so outrageous that seems so left field, like going from a gym owner to a stage speaker, right? Keynote speaker. It seems so left field or right field, whatever you want. But in order to get there, I will have to become a new person probably 3 or 4 times to get to it. And that to me is much, I don't know, it sounds more appealing than let's set one small goal here and then another one, because the only thing that will be focused between this point and that point is getting it done. Yeah.
And so can I ask you a question?
Of course. Everyone does that. They're like, I don't know if I can ask you a question. You can ask me a question.
Well, yeah, I mean, because we chatted about, the 20,000 steps between, now and that goal that you have. And so how do you approach that?
Like quantify it?
Yeah, quantify it. Or if you're setting a goal that to you sounds like not out of the realm possibility, but is so foreign to what you live and breathe and know, how do you, what do those steps look like? And how do you, envision the next month or two?
So my biggest thing is finding people who did it first or have done it before me or are doing it, right? So I want to meet those people and be around those people.
Smart.
And if somebody mentors in that space, cool, let me pay you. Yeah. Because you're going to help compress that time. If it's going, like even this podcast, me being able to talk to people is helping me talk. Yes. Right? Getting used to that feeling of being in front of somebody, even if it's only one person, to talk. Yeah. But at the same time, expanding the network. Then if it's going and finding somebody to teach me how to articulate my words better. Yeah. I think because I'm Australian, I'm going to say this anyway because it's in my head. Because I'm Australian, the faster I speak, the harder it is for people to understand me.
That's not your fault, though.
Yeah,
no. We like your voice.
But it can be changed.
Sure.
Like learning how to slow down and talk. Learning how to cultivate or express my words more. Learning how to have sometimes I can be very monotone. So learning how to have range in my vocals is important in order to have a keynote speech. Otherwise people will probably go to sleep or leave.
Fair.
Right? So it's those little things that I know are important for the big thing that I need to start right now. It's like a diet, right? If I want to lose 20 pounds, I know the small little steps that I need to change right now is exercise and my food.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think that's also another good point for entrepreneurs as well, or anyone really trying to do something is it's kind of the idea. And I think about this a lot, and not in a bad way, I think in a great way, like you're not special.
No.
So if you've something that you want to do, even if it's like creating a product that's never existed in the market or a service that's never existed in the market, like someone creating a product or a service has happened a million times over. And so you're not alone on a boat doing this alone. There's so many resources, so many people. And so, yeah, I mean, utilizing your network and not being afraid to ask for help. Yeah, I think
that's probably one of my hardest
Yeah.
is asking
for sure.
is
Yeah.
asking for help. I've gotten a lot better at it. But yeah, in the beginning it was like, oh, just let me do it all myself.
Yeah.
And that's when you combust.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
What else? Is there anything else in advice you'd give to people?
Oh God, I mean, I feel like we
Because
chatted.
you do, like, what you did was you went 9 to 5 entrepreneurship. Like, you literally flipped a coin.
But that was, yes, however, very lucky. So I also want to note that I'm very fiscally conservative. So I'm not someone that would decide to, one day wake up with a consistent great paycheck and then not. So again, lucky circumstances, fortunate circumstances. The way that our kind of self-funding works is that Gary, my business partner, does private equity work on the side, basically to help fund our operations and our own salaries. And so, it's expensive to live here, and I want to fuel myself well, and that's not cheap. So yeah, I think, the flip of a switch was with the understanding that I would still have a roof over my house.
Yep.
And that those kind of background logistics would be sorted out. And then I think also knowing too that if I had to go back to a corporate job, it's an unfortunate plan B that I could rely on because of my experience, but was so motivated to never go back.
Yeah, you're like, we'll not let this.
Yeah. And that's, again, something that still kind of like keeps me up at night a bit. But I'm like, yeah.
I think that thought process of having to go back and work for somebody else, like, will haunt every entrepreneur not to fail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And especially if you are obsessed with the thing and the impact that you're trying to create and provide others.
I like it. Jen, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Ash.
Thank you so much, and we should do this again.
Always.
Thank you.